Hi, this is part 2 of our 2017 ICD-10 tabbing of the book and highlighting for your certification exam purposes. So pretty much just tips and tricks about ICD10CM 2017. So in our last video, we really tabbed our book. In this video, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about certain sections. And we'll try to keep these short so they are watchable and sweet and easy to follow along. And if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Coding Spot, and you can also visit our website, www.thecodingspot.com, for more information about us. But subscribe to our channel because we have really a mini series of tabbing our ICD-10 book and tips and tricks for your certification exam pertaining to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up our book. If you watched our last video about tabbing the book, you know that we tabbed our table of contents. It's really important in case you kind of get lost and you need some direction. You can come here and you have all the chapter names, the different volumes, the tables, the indexes, and conventions, etc. And we're going to flip our page over. And I already highlighted this little section, but you are going to want to create a tab for your preface. We didn't tab it initially because it's more into the nitty-gritty, but there are some important facts made available to us on our preface page. So, for example, on the exam, if you have a question about what the ICD10CM manual stands for, it spells out the abbreviation. Also, there's lots of other information like who publishes ICD-10, some information about the characteristics of ICD-10. So it's just really good to know in a clutch. You can go to your preface and find out that kind of business information, right? So I just made a tab called Intro, and I'm going to go ahead and just tab it Intro. So what else I'm going to do is, as I am, learning, I'm going to write notes in my books. So some notes I might write here are, when is ICD-10 published? Who are the responsible parties for providing the guidelines? And any other information like that that might be helpful for me. There's not a lot of room here, but there's some extra room over here, so I can write my notes there and keep my notes organized for the test, right? List of features, there's not much else we need to talk about here so much, but it might be helpful for you to read through the list of features in ICD-10, and specifically in this book. And I want to get into the, so we have on page 4, if you're using your AAPC ICD-10 book, we have the practical steps for using the ICD-10 manual. And this is nice. It breaks down the code structure and how to choose a specific code, the code format. It also tells us a little bit about the structure of the book, so we know what sub-chapters are and how categories are divided. And we also, probably one of the most important little tidbits of information is the tabular list and the alphabetic index and what volumes they are, which if you were with me in the last video, we did tab that. So our alphabetic index is known as volume 2. So if you didn't watch our last video, you probably should, but also make sure that you are tabbing your volumes. So alpha index, volume 2, that's going to need a tab that says alphabetic index and volume 2. And then volume 1 is your tabular list. So it's important to know those, the differences there. And also your tables. And so that's really what the practical steps kind of covers, that information. So our official conventions. There's a lot of useful information here. It talks about our codes for reporting purposes, the placeholder character. So our conventions are tabbed, and there's lots of important information here. So some of the most important information would be about our placeholder character. So you'll hear that referred to as placeholder X, right? You hear that referred to that way often. And it can get confusing for people because placeholder X isn't an option. It's mandatory if it's in the code itself. So it's not our choice whether we include placeholder X, it's mandatory. So I would highlight placeholder X. It's used as a placeholder at certain codes, and the reason behind that is to allow future expansion of those codes. Where a placeholder exists, the X must be used. It's not an option. It has to be used to be considered a valid code. And that information is right here. We talk about the 7th character and what's important about that it talks about abbreviations here, alphabetic index abbreviations. So I want to stop here and point this out. I would definitely highlight this. So we have our abbreviations, right? But under our abbreviations, we have the alphabetic index abbreviations, and then we have the tabular list abbreviations. So we know we have that labeled. We have our alphabetic index and our tabular list labeled. So they could mean different things depending on whether we're looking at code up in our alpha index, right? So our alpha index starts here, or if we're looking it up in our tabular list, right, which starts here, right when our code range starts. And so when the meaning of things like this get specific like that, it's important that we know where we can go to make sure that what we think we know is correct. And this is important for our test. So I'm going to make sure that I highlight here alphabetic index abbreviations. So these NEC, not elsewhere classified, and NOS, these are what these mean in the alphabetic index. And now I'm going to highlight tabular list abbreviations because NEC and NOS mean this if we're looking at code up in the tabular list abbreviations. So we need to start really understanding that codes and different conventions for our codes can have different meanings depending on where we're looking them up in our book. Also in our convention section, we have brackets, punctuation. So punctuation includes brackets, parentheses, and colons. And brackets are used, if you see here, we talk about brackets are used in the tabular list to enclose synonyms and alternative wording or explanatory phrases. And brackets are used in the alphabetic index to identify manifestation codes, right? Two different things. So how are we going to highlight that so we know? We are going to highlight important words. Brackets are used in the tabular list. And then brackets are used in the alphabetic index. Now when we are looking at, if we have a question about what brackets mean in these particular places, we are going to come to our conventions and we know that they're different there, right? They're highlighted different. And we have the same with the parentheses, right? So here, though, parentheses are used in the alphabetic index and the tabular list. So we're going to go ahead and highlight that too. Alphabetic index and the tabular list. Colons. Colons are used in the tabular list after an incomplete term, which needs one or more of the modifiers following the colon to make it applicable to any given category. So we're going to go ahead and just highlight tabular list, right? So see, these are just really, our highlights are drawing our focus to specific words, important words. So we have other and unspecified codes, right? So codes titled other or other specified are for use when the information in the medical record or documentation provided doesn't give us the detail for a more specified code. In fact, when you see other or other specified in a description, you're going to want to make sure that there isn't a more specified code available for that. So it's important to, when you see other and other specified, kind of let it flag you to see if maybe there's a more specified code available for you. And so here again we have tabular list and alphabetic index. So we just know that they can mean two different things. And that's where our focus will go. So again, unspecified follows that same convention. Includes notes. The includes appear immediately under a 3-character code title to further state or give an example of the content of the category. And if you're going through a course, then you're kind of getting examples of all of this. So we don't really need to get into this. I really just want to focus on really important highlighting opportunities and things that might help you for the certification exam. Excludes note. So excludes note is a big deal. We have excludes 1 and excludes 2. So excludes 1 is not coded here, right? Excludes 1 was taught to me as, excludes 1 means that it could never be coded together. So if there's an excludes 1 note under a code, it can never be coded with the condition that is stated in the excludes 1 note. Now, in 2017, the coding clinic actually released additional information regarding clarifying the excludes 1 note and stating some additional information guiding people on when to use it and what does it mean. And even though typically an excludes 1 note means that these two conditions can never be coded together, there are very few exceptions to this. And if you are interested in it, I would suggest that you go to the cms.gov website and you download the ICD10 guidelines. They always have the most current version. So even if you have a 2017 coding book, chances are you might have the 2016 guidelines in that book still because of the time that the book was published. So you just want to make sure that your version of ICD10 either has the most recent guidelines in it, or you know how to access the most recent guidelines and you know what those changes are. And there's more information released about the excludes 1 note. Excludes 2 note indicates that the condition excluded is not part of the condition represented by the code, but a patient can have both of the conditions. So excludes 1, you typically think never coded together, and excludes 2, they're just not, they're not included in the code. And a patient can have both conditions, but it would be coded elsewhere. So those are really important to know. And I suggest you go to the cms.gov website, or I'm sorry, the CDC website, although I think that the CMS website has it too, for more information about it. It's definitely located on the CDC.gov website. They release the current guidelines as soon as they are approved and even before in draft form. So that is a good resource to know about. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight excludes 1 and excludes 2 because there are going to be questions on your certification exam regarding your conventions. So it's important that you know where to find them. So we also have etiology and manifestation codes. This can be confusing to some people because etiology and manifestation conventions include a couple different things. So certain conditions both have an underlying etiology and multiple body system manifestations due to the underlying etiology. So when you think of etiology manifestation, you think of cause and effect. So there's all kinds of conditions that you can have the condition and then you can develop other manifestations of that condition. And so in those cases, that's what we're talking about with etiology and manifestation codes. So this is really important that you understand these guidelines too, and you know where to find this information, because there's a section on conventions in your ICD-10 guidelines, in your ICD-10 book, to help you in your coding careers and selecting the proper code. It's going to definitely be tested on the CPC exam. There might be a few questions about it, and not more than a few questions, but there will be a few questions about it somewhere. I can pretty much give maybe 75% say that with accuracy. So there's different types of manifestation codes that have diseases classified elsewhere in the title, and there are also manifestation codes that will instruct you to use an additional code. And once we get into the actual coding, you'll see that more. But they're very important, so we're going to give them a highlight. We have and, with, and see also. This, I love this little convention definition right here, because it's really giving us the definition of the word for coding purposes. So we know that and is used should be interpreted to mean either and or when it appears in a title. So when it appears in a title, right? And. For example, cases of tuberculosis, a case of tuberculosis of bones, tuberculosis of joints, and tuberculosis of bones and joints are classified to subcategory A18.0, tuberculosis of bones and joints. So there's the example of how and can mean and or. And then with, the word with should be interpreted to mean associated with or due to. This is really important. With, associated with, or due to, when it appears in a code title, the alphabetic index, or an instructional note in the tabular list. So all three of those, right? It should be interpreted to mean associated with or due to. And let me just give you an example of that. So diabetes associated with neuropathy. Diabetes with neuropathy. Those two things mean the same thing. So whether, if it says with, it should be interpreted to mean associated with. And so the word with in the alphabetic index is sequenced immediately following the main term in alphabetic order. So another little snippet for us. We also have the definition of see also and see. The see instruction follows a main term in the alphabetic index, indicates that another term should be referenced. It is necessary to go to the main term referenced with the see note. So that's important, right? See means you have to go. You have to go look at whatever code is referenced. So it is necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight C, the C instruction. So I'm going to highlight C and is necessary to go to the main term there. Just a couple highlights to really let me focus on that. A see also instruction following a main term in the alphabetic index instructs there is another main term that may also be referenced that may provide additional information. It may provide additional alphabetic index entries that may be useful. It is not necessary to follow the see also note. So all I'm going to do here is highlight see also, and it is not necessary to follow the see also note when the original main term provided the necessary code. Okay. So C is necessary, C also isn't. Code also, a code also instruction says that two codes may be required to fully describe a condition, but this note does not provide sequencing direction. So a code also isn't telling you which code would be sequenced first, so what code order, but it does say that two codes might be required. Again, may. And then we have default code. A code listed next to a main term in the ICD-10 alpha index is referred to as a default code. The default code represents that condition that is most commonly associated with that main term, and the unspecified code for that condition. If a condition is documented in the medical record, for example, we have appendicitis, without any additional information, such as acute or chronic, the default code should be assigned. So the default code will be, if you're looking up a main term, just like it says here, appendicitis, and that's the only information you have about it. You might have a bunch of other code options right below that main term, but all the information you have is appendicitis, then you would have to select the default code. And now we're going to cover the symbols and conventions, because this is really just a nice tool, right? So we see here additional characters required. We have 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So if you see any of these red circles with that number, one of those numbers inside, it means it's not a complete code, and you will need an additional character to complete it, either 4th digit, a 5th digit, a 6th digit, or a 7th digit. The 7th, the extension X alert, this purplish blue 7, this symbol means that placeholder X is required. We have in this book, we're fortunate enough to have Medicare code edit symbols and colors throughout the book. Age conflicts, these are really important codes, especially for auditors. You know, sometimes you can just know by looking at a code that it's improperly coded because of an age conflict. So newborn, pediatric, maternity, and adult, this is very important. So I would highlight age conflict, and here's why. I'm going to highlight these newborn. I'm going to highlight newborn. Age of 0, right? Pediatric. Age range is 0 to 17. Maternity, 12 to 55. Adult, 18 to 124. So I'm just going to highlight my age ranges so I know what age range a newborn, a pediatric patient, a maternity patient, or an adult would fall under. And these these red boxes with the obvious capital letter let us flag us for those. So if you see a question on your coding exam and it's for a 70-year-old woman, and you have a code that you are choosing between two codes, and one of them has a red box with a P on it, you know that's impossible and that's not the correct code. So just a little bit. Same applies for sex conflict. We have the male symbol and the female symbol. Manifestation codes, you see this bluish, it's like, yeah, it's probably like a light blue highlight. This is going to identify manifestation codes throughout our book. And remember, if you're not using the AAPC ICD-10 book, your structure might be a little bit different. So key terms are highlighted in green. This is a great flag for us to go right to the main term. We know that a green highlight indicates a key term. This grayed out box around a code description, other specified code, this is letting us know that these codes indicate, you know, that this is an other specified code. And then a yellow is unspecified code. So both of, this yellow right here might flag us to look for more specified documentation before we just select an unspecified code. So an unspecified code, an example of that might be asthma, right? And then a more specified code would be asthma and exasperation, right? So that's an example of that. Sequencing, admission, complication, and comorbidity. We have all these nice little boxes that are going to indicate to us different information about the codes. For example, this right here, unacceptable principal diagnosis based on Medicare code edits. Code exempt from diagnosis reporting present on admission. So these are inpatient, these are really referencing really great tools for inpatient coders. ZCode as first listed diagnosis. So certain codes may only be reported as the primary first listed diagnosis. If you watched our last video, our first one in this mini-series, you knew that there is an appendix that talks about Z codes as first listed or principal diagnosis. We have excludes 1, excludes 2. So if you see these under code, you know that excludes 1 is not coded here. Think of excludes 1, think of never, and now, though, in 2017, actually 2016, Coding Clinic released more information about that, and it's truly not never, but most of the time. Again, go to look at the cdc.gov website if you don't have the most current guidelines. Excludes 2, not included here, includes, and talks about what that means. So we have first, second, and third boxes here. The first is the first trimester symbol. Second, obviously the second, and the third as a third trimester. A black circle is a new code. It indicates a new code. Triangle facing up, revised code title. So the code title changed from the previous edition to this edition. And 2 triangles pointing at each other, revised text. And then we have citations to AHA's Coding Clinic, which you hear me reference a lot. I love AHA, and it's something that you have to purchase, but they release, when they get questions about coding scenarios, they release information really providing instruction on specific coding scenarios and different codes. So they actually released the Coding Clinic regarding excludes 1, 2. Okay, so that's a wrap on that. Our ICD guidelines are going to take us a while, so I'm not going to do that right now, but I want to show you guys something in our tabular. So volume 1 of our tabular list is also, as you can see here on the top. So you might see a question at some point saying, what section is, what volume is the tabular list in? And from your tab and knowing that the titles are up here, you would know the answer. Okay, but so here's the, just what I really wanted to show you guys. So as you can see, and I'll just use this first page as our example, everything we just covered, look how this is it being applied. We have fourth, fifth, these require a fourth and a fifth digit. We have green text highlighted, these are key terms. We have yellow highlighted diagnosis, unspecified. We have includes notes, right? Excludes 1 notes. So everything that we just went over, I just want you to know that you immediately see it as soon as you get into your tabular list. And in case you forgot those many different conventions that we went over, this is one of my favorite things. Sorry if it's a little bit blurry, but it gives us the key on the bottom of the page, right? And it does throughout the book. So we have a key box here and a key box here on the dual pages, right? So we know what all of our little conventions mean, and that's a great resource. And make sure that you know that about your books. So we are going to, in part 3 of our ICD-10 tabbing, highlighting, and tips and tricks for 2017. We are going to start with our guidelines next. So thank you for joining. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel. You can follow us on Twitter at The Coding Spot, and you can visit our website at thecodingspot.com. Thank you.